They say the biggest mistake in corporate tech is handing the keys to a sociopath. But the real fatal error is making a scapegoat out of the architect who built your system from scratch. When my access badge flashed red at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, leadership thought they were locking me out. I just smiled, knowing they had actually locked themselves inside a digital cage that was already sinking to the bottom. Hello, dear listeners of Boss Revenge Stories, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for your unwavering support. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely disabled our channel's monetization features, leaving us without the operating budget to continue, which means we will be forced to stop uploading new videos here in the near future and transition our operations entirely to Patreon. If you enjoyed today's story, please support us by joining our Patreon channel to experience exclusive, true stories that are even better, significantly longer, and packed with intricate details we simply cannot publish on YouTube, all brought to life by multiple emotional voice actors in a single narrative. You can join us right now by scanning the Patreon QR code on your screen or by clicking the link provided in the description or the pinned comment of this video. Now, let us dive right into today's tale of corporate vengeance, told through the eyes of our protagonist, Eliana Russell. The polished glass turnstiles in the main lobby of EtherCore Logistics always emitted a soft, pleasant green chime when you tapped your badge. It was a sound I had heard thousands of times over the years, but at exactly 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, as I returned from a quick coffee run, the turnstile did not chime green. It flashed a harsh, violent crimson, accompanied by a sharp, denying buzz. I swiped again. Crimson, buzz. I was the chief cloud security architect for EtherCore, a massive titan in supply chain technology handling billions in freight logistics. Or rather, I was the chief architect until about 2 minutes ago. As I stood there holding a lukewarm flat white, my corporate smartphone vibrated aggressively in my coat pocket. I pulled it out just in time to see the screen go completely black. A small white loading bar appeared, followed by the undeniable manufacturer logo. A remote wipe. They were factory resetting my device in real time. My smartwatch, which was still paired to my personal cellular network, buzzed with an incoming automated email notification. The subject line was cold, standard, and legally sanitized. Termination of employment due to security policy violations. Any normal person would have panicked. They would have marched up to the security desk, demanded answers, caused a massive scene, and screamed about unfair dismissal. But I did not feel panic. All I felt was a cold, calculating clarity washing over me. I knew exactly who had orchestrated this ambush: Marcus Vance. Marcus was the smooth-talking, slick-haired vice president of engineering who spent more time managing his golf handicap than his actual departments. Over the past 8 months, Marcus had aggressively slashed the cloud security budget to pad his own departmental profit margins and secure a massive year-end bonus. He ignored my warnings. He bypassed compliance checks. And now, the bill was coming due. We had a massive federal audit scheduled for next week, mandated by one of our top-tier government partners. Marcus knew the infrastructure was a fragile house of cards, ready to collapse under a federal microscope. He desperately needed a scapegoat. He needed someone high enough on the corporate ladder to take the fall for the glaring security holes, but expendable enough to fire without board approval. He chose me. I turned my back on the flashing red turnstile, walked out of the lobby, and crossed the busy downtown street. I stepped into a quiet, dimly lit coffee shop, directly opposite the towering EtherCore headquarters. I chose a small table by the window, giving me a perfect view of the steel and glass monolith I had helped build. Setting my coffee down, I unzipped my bag and pulled out my personal laptop. I booted it up and silently connected to a hidden, encrypted cellular hotspot I kept entirely off the company radar. A bitter, hollow smile crept onto my face as I watched the EtherCore building loom against the afternoon sky. Just last month, I had placed a comprehensive risk assessment document on Marcus's desk, detailing exactly how vulnerable we were. He flat out refused to sign it. He called me paranoid. Behind my back, he had quietly requested the IT department to change my master administrator passwords, thinking he was staging a brilliant, stealthy coup. He honestly believed he was a mastermind playing three-dimensional chess. But Marcus Vance was a corporate politician, not an engineer. He possessed the technical depth of a shallow puddle. He had no idea how the very foundations of EtherCore actually worked. When I built the core security infrastructure from the ground up, I did not just rely on standard passwords and two-factor authentication. The entire root system was intricately tied to my unique biometric identifiers through a highly classified, proprietary defense protocol I had personally authored. I named it Cerberus. The Cerberus protocol had very strict parameters for handing over system architecture. To remove my supreme administrative access, Marcus needed a cryptographically signed handover key, verified by my own biometrics, proving that I was willingly passing the torch. By cowardly deleting my credentials without that specific handover protocol, Marcus had just triggered the ultimate failsafe. To Cerberus, the sudden, unauthorized eradication of the chief architect did not look like a standard Friday afternoon firing. It looked exactly like a hostile takeover. It looked like the core system was being violently hijacked by an advanced insider threat. Marcus thought he had just locked me out in the cold. He had no clue that he had just armed a digital nuclear warhead directly beneath his own leather desk chair. I took a slow sip of my coffee, my eyes fixed on the 12th floor of the building where the server operations center was located. I did not need to do anything. I just had to sit back, watch, and let Cerberus wake up. The clock on my laptop screen shifted to exactly 5 in the afternoon. Across the street, hidden behind layers of reinforced concrete and tinted glass, the digital heartbeat of EtherCore Logistics simply stopped beating. It did not crash violently or spark a sudden outage. It was much more elegant than that. The entire development pipeline, the sprawling nervous system that allowed thousands of engineers to push updates, fix bugs, and keep global freight moving, froze solid. In the engineering pits on the 9th floor, a junior developer likely tried to commit a routine patch for the weekend. Instead of the familiar green confirmation text, his terminal would have spat out a blinding red line. Error 403, forbidden, thinking it was a mere glitch. He probably tried again. Error 403, within 60 seconds. That same error code propagated across every active terminal in the building. Hundreds of developers, senior engineers, and database administrators were suddenly staring at access-denied prompts. Every single attempt to upload new code, modify existing structures, or even query the active databases was universally rejected. Deep within the server architecture, Cerberus was fully awake and executing its primary directive. It initiated a proprietary defensive sequence I had designated as Fortress Lockdown. Recognizing that the chief architect had been forcibly removed without the proper biometric cryptographic handshake, Cerberus assumed the network had been breached by a high-level hostile entity. To protect the company's most valuable assets, the protocol began a ruthless, automated quarantine. Like a digital blast door slamming shut, Cerberus systematically grabbed every single active project folder, every proprietary algorithm, and every live deployment schedule. Using military-grade encryption, it locked these files in an impenetrable cryptographic vault and dragged them into a completely isolated sandbox environment. No one could read them, no one could edit them. The files were functionally exiled into a void where not even the highest-level executive network could reach them. Meanwhile, up on the executive floor, the illusion of control that Marcus Vance clung to was rapidly disintegrating. I could almost picture the exact shade of pale his face turned when the red phone started ringing. EtherCore did not just move boxes. We tracked millions of tons of freight for the largest retail giants in the world. When the development pipeline locked down, the live tracking interface severed its external connections to prevent data exfiltration. Suddenly, the supply chain managers at massive global retailers were staring at terrifyingly blank white screens. No coordinates, no delivery estimates, just an endless, empty void where billions of dollars of inventory were supposed to be. The customer support lines flooded. Account managers were screaming into their headsets, demanding answers from an engineering department that was entirely locked out of its own house. Panic is a predictable catalyst for stupidity. Marcus, desperate to regain control and terrified of the escalating client fury, decided to play the hero. From the comfort of his corner office, he logged into his newly minted Supreme Administrator account. He tried to force a manual override, intending to bypass the lockdown and forcefully reboot the deployment pipeline. He typed in his credentials and smashed the Enter key with brute force. That was his fatal mistake. Cerberus was not a passive firewall. It was a reactive, aggressive defense mechanism. When it detected an unrecognized super-user account attempting to aggressively bypass a fortress lockdown, it instantly reclassified the threat level. This was no longer just an insider threat. Cerberus labeled Marcus's action as a hostile attack behavior, and Cerberus was programmed to neutralize hostile attackers without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, the protocol retaliated. It immediately targeted the physical access control systems linked to the Active Directory. Every single executive keycard, including the gold-trimmed badge hanging around Marcus's neck, was instantly stripped of its clearance. The electronic deadbolts on the physical server rooms snapped shut with a heavy, metallic finality. The high-security elevators disabled their top-floor destinations, trapping the executive board on whatever floor they currently occupied. Then came the physical alarms, because Cerberus registered a critical, active breach. It triggered the internal security sirens. Sitting at my quiet table in the coffee shop, I took a slow sip of my flat white. Through the massive glass facade of the EtherCore building, I watched the chaotic ballet unfold. On the 12th floor, where the primary server banks and security hubs were located, I could clearly see the strobing flash of red emergency lights illuminating the windows. Shadows of panicked employees sprinted past the glass, moving erratically like ants whose hill had just been kicked over. It looked like a scene ripped straight out of a high-budget corporate espionage action movie, the physical manifestation of a digital slaughter. They were trapped in a prison of their own making, locked out by the very security they had taken for granted, and hunted by a protocol they did not even know existed. I set my empty coffee cup down and gently closed the lid of my personal laptop. I pulled my untraceable burner phone from my coat pocket. Using an encrypted, routed connection that bounced through servers in 3 different countries, I drafted a very brief, anonymous text message directed straight to Marcus Vance's personal cell phone. "Have a great weekend. Do not forget to water my plants." I hit send, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and walked out into the cool Friday evening air. Monday morning arrived with the crisp, artificial optimism that only Silicon Valley could manufacture. The National Supply Chain Technology Conference was the crown jewel of the industry's annual calendar, a grand theater where tech executives gathered to pat themselves on the back and secure millions in venture capital. EtherCore Logistics had the prime slot, a highly anticipated keynote presentation designed to showcase our brand new predictive automation engine. Or rather, my predictive automation engine. Marcus Vance was in his element. He strode onto the massive stage wearing the unofficial uniform of the modern tech visionary, a minimalist dark shirt paired with designer sneakers that cost more than most people made in a month. He practically glowed under the stage lights, soaking up the applause from an audience of thousands of investors, industry analysts, and tech journalists. Marcus never wrote a single line of the codebase, but he possessed a legendary talent for standing in front of other people's brilliance and taking the bow. I bought a freelance guest pass with my own money and took a seat right in the 3rd row. I was not hiding. In fact, I was dressed to be seen. I wore a perfectly tailored, sharp emerald green blazer over a sleek silk blouse, paired with matching trousers. It was an outfit Marcus had once scoffed at in the break room, telling me it was entirely too flashy for someone who just typed at a keyboard all day. Today, it was my armor, and I wore a faint, knowing half-smile as I settled into the plush auditorium chair. On stage, Marcus was wrapping up his buzzword. Heavy introduction. He spoke grandly about synergy, machine learning paradigms, and revolutionizing global freight. "And now," Marcus announced, his voice echoing through the state-of-the-art sound system, "I want to show you the future of EtherCore. Let us deploy the automation engine live. He turned toward the gigantic LED screen spanning the entire width of the stage. He held up his wireless clicker with a dramatic flourish and pressed the button. The audience leaned forward, expecting a dazzling array of sleek dashboards, real-time growth charts, and dynamic global maps. Instead, the massive screen blinked pitch black for 2 agonizing seconds. Then, a blinding, aggressive crimson red illuminated the entire auditorium, casting a demonic glow over Marcus's face. In the center of the giant screen, written in massive, unforgiving block letters, a system prompt appeared. Administrative error. Deployment environment locked due to structural incompetence. Chief architect authentication required. Stunned. Heavy silence fell over the thousands of attendees. You could hear a pin drop in the cavernous hall. On stage, Marcus physically recoiled. A bead of sweat immediately broke out on his forehead, glistening under the spotlight. He desperately mashed the button on his clicker again and again, but the crimson screen remained unyielding. Well, you know how conference wireless networks can be? Marcus stammered into his headset microphone, his voice cracking slightly. He offered the audience a tight, plastic smile that screamed sheer panic. Just a minor display glitch. Folks, our engineers are probably pushing a live update right now. But Cerberus was not done with him. The protocol was designed for absolute transparency during a lockdown. Right on cue, the giant red error message dissolved, replaced by a rapid cascading waterfall of raw system logs. It was not just random code. It was a brutal public autopsy of EtherCore's ruined backend. The screen boldly displayed every single security bypass Marcus had authorized, every broken firewall rule, and the catastrophic collapse of the integration architecture he had carelessly butchered over the weekend trying to force an override. It was a neon sign broadcasting his sheer technical illiteracy to the entire tech world. The polite silence in the audience quickly morphed into a low, chaotic murmur. Investors were whispering urgently to their associates. Tech journalists were furiously typing on their tablets, capturing every humiliating line of code flashing across the stage. Marcus stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. He looked completely and utterly helpless, stripped of his corporate jargon and exposed to the harsh light of reality. It was the perfect moment. I calmly stood up from my seat in the third row. I smoothed down the lapels of my emerald blazer and stepped into the aisle. The movement caught his eye. Amidst the sea of murmuring faces, Marcus looked down and locked eyes with me. For one long, agonizing second, time seemed to stop. His eyes widened in absolute, soul-crushing horror. He looked at my pristine suit, my relaxed posture, and the undeniable smirk playing on my lips. In that single, silent exchange, the crushing reality finally hit him. I was not crying at home. I was not a broken, defeated employee begging for severance. I was right here, in the front row, treating his total professional destruction like a highly entertaining matinee show. I gave him a slow, mocking nod, turned on my heel, and walked casually toward the exit doors, while the raw error codes continued to rain down behind him. By the time I reached the lobby of the convention center, my phone buzzed with a financial news alert. The disastrous, highly publicized demo had triggered an immediate market panic. Within 20 minutes of Marcus stepping off of that stage, EtherCore's stock price plummeted by a staggering 8% on the open exchange. Hundreds of millions of dollars in market valuation vanished into thin air before the morning coffee even got cold. Back at headquarters, the board of directors had just slammed the panic button, completely unaware that the real nightmare was only just beginning. By Tuesday afternoon, the silence from EtherCore was finally broken. I was sitting at my kitchen island when my phone began to buzz. The caller identification did not show the Human Resources Department or even the legal team. It simply read, EtherCore Office of the Chief Executive. Victoria Sterling was on the line. Victoria was a notoriously ruthless operator. She had built her career by treating employees like disposable batteries and solving every corporate crisis with either a mountain of cash or a crushing lawsuit. She was the kind of chief executive who would smile warmly while sliding a non-disclosure agreement across the table, legally binding you to silence. I answered the call and pressed the speakerphone button, setting the device down on the marble countertop. "Eliana, we need to talk," Victoria began. Her voice was sharp, cold, and entirely devoid of pleasantries. "I am going to keep this very brief. What you have done to our infrastructure is a direct violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. My legal team is currently drafting a federal lawsuit for intentional corporate sabotage. You are looking at a multi-million-dollar liability and potential prison time." She paused, letting the heavy thread of federal prosecution hang in the air, expecting me to crumble. In her world, the mere mention of federal lawyers was usually enough to make anyone surrender. I did not flinch. Instead, I reached into my manicure kit, pulled out a glass nail file, and began casually shaping my left index fingernail. "Are you finished, Victoria?" I asked, keeping my tone completely flat and conversational. "This is not a negotiation, Eliana," she snapped, her composure cracking just a fraction. "You are right, it is not," I replied, blowing a speck of nail dust from my finger, "because I have not touched a single server, terminal, or line of code since exactly 4:30 on Friday afternoon. I did not sabotage anything. Your system is simply an automated defensive architecture reacting to an improper, unauthorized removal of my credentials. If your lawyers actually bother to pull the raw access logs, they will see exactly who triggered the lockdown. You are currently locked out of your own empire because of the spectacular stupidity of your vice president. So, if you want to sue someone for corporate sabotage, I suggest you serve Marcus with those papers." A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the line. The rhythmic scraping of my nail file was the only sound echoing in the room. I knew exactly what was happening on the other end. Victoria was staring at her general counsel, who was likely nodding in grim confirmation. The logs did not lie. Marcus had left his digital fingerprints all over the crime scene. She had zero legal leverage over me. When Victoria spoke again, the icy threat had completely melted away, replaced by a sickeningly sweet, maternal tone. It was the classic pivot of a cornered corporate predator. "Eliana, let us not be hasty," Victoria cooed smoothly, as if we were old friends resolving a minor misunderstanding. "Clearly, there has been a massive failure in our internal communication. Marcus acted entirely outside of his authority. We value your expertise immensely. Either Corps is a family, and we want you back. If you come in tomorrow and untangle this mess, I am prepared to reinstate you immediately with double your previous salary and a comprehensive benefits package." It was a tempting offer for anyone else, but I knew the game. Reinstatement meant rejoining their payroll, falling back under their corporate jurisdiction, and ultimately, giving them the power to fire me again once the system was secure. "I decline," I said simply. "Excuse me?" Victoria's voice tightened. "I am no longer on the market for employment. Victoria, as of Monday morning, I officially registered my own independent cybersecurity consulting firm. I am now the founder and sole proprietor of an external corporate entity." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the kitchen counter, dropping the casual demeanor. It was time to close the trap. "I am not coming back to the family," I stated, letting every word strike like a hammer. "But my firm is available for hire as an independent contractor. I am willing to offer either Corps a one-time emergency remediation service to unlock your deployment pipeline before the federal auditors arrive." I could hear Victoria take a sharp breath. "Fine. What is your consulting rate?" "My fee is $2.5 million, I declared. "Payable entirely upfront via wire transfer. Oh, and there is one more non-negotiable stipulation. When I walk into that building to perform the service, Marcus Vance is not allowed to be anywhere on the premises. If I even see his shadow in the lobby, the deal is off, and you can explain the system failure to the federal government yourselves." For a long moment, Victoria said absolutely nothing. She was a woman used to holding all the cards, and now she was staring at an empty hand. "Have your legal team send over the contractor paperwork," I added, breaking the silence. "I will see you tomorrow." I ended the call before she could utter a single word of protest. On Wednesday morning, The atmosphere inside the executive glass conference center, affectionately known as the War Room, was thick enough to choke on. I did not walk through those double doors as a subordinate summoned to the principal's office. I walked in as the executioner holding a stay of execution. The long mahogany table was surrounded by the company's elite legal defense team. They looked like a row of exhausted gargoyles in custom-tailored suits. The air smelled of stale espresso and raw, unadulterated desperation. The ticking clock in the room was deafening, even if it was only metaphorical. The federal government auditors were scheduled to arrive at exactly 8 o'clock on Friday morning. If the deployment pipeline remained locked, either corps would not just fail the audit, they would instantly lose a defense contract worth multiple billions of dollars, and the resulting fallout would trigger criminal investigations into their data handling practices. Corporate ruin was sitting right across the table from them. Victoria Sterling sat at the head of the table, her face a mask of rigid porcelain. She slid a thick, leather-bound folder across the polished wood toward me. $2.5 million, Victoria stated, her voice tight but heavily controlled. Payable upon the successful decryption of our servers. Everything you asked for is in there. Sign the bottom line, and let us get this nightmare over with. I did not reach for the pen. Instead, I opened the folder and flipped to the third page. I did not even need to read the fine print. I knew exactly how Victoria operated. Buried beneath the payment terms was an incredibly broad, draconian non-disclosure agreement, fused with an indemnity clause. It was a classic corporate legal trap. By signing it, I would not just be agreeing to unlock the system. I would be legally assuming all liability for any underlying structural vulnerabilities that existed after the system came back online. Victoria was trying to make me legally responsible for the very mess Marcus had created. I closed the folder and tossed it back across the table with a dismissive flick of my wrist. "Do you think I am an amateur, Victoria?" I asked, maintaining a voice so calm it seemed to rattle the lawyers even more. "I am not signing an indemnity trap to cover your executive negligence." Before anyone could object, I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, firmly bound stack of documents. I dropped it squarely in the center of the mahogany table. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. "Those are fully notarized copies of internal communications," I explained, leaning back in my chair. "It contains every single email Marcus Vance sent directing the IT department to bypass security protocols. It contains the exact budget spreadsheets where he slashed the defense infrastructure to pad his bonus. And most importantly, it contains his explicit, time-stamped written communications conspiring to terminate my employment to use me as the designated scapegoat for the upcoming federal audit." The lead corporate counsel for either corps leaned forward, gingerly pulling the stack toward him. As his eyes scanned the first few pages, all the color violently drained from his face. He looked like a man who had just read his own obituary. He leaned over and whispered frantically into Victoria's ear. I could see the muscles in her jaw clenching so hard it looked like her teeth might shatter. "So, here are my new terms," I announced, taking total control of the room. "The previous contract is dead. I require a new agreement drafted immediately. My independent consulting firm retains full, exclusive intellectual property rights to the Cerberus Protocol. Either corps does not own my security architecture anymore. You will lease it from me. You will pay the initial $2.5 million unlocking fee, plus a mandatory monthly licensing and maintenance fee of $100,000 for as long as you use my system." The lawyers began to protest, but Victoria held up a single, trembling hand, silencing them instantly. She stared at me with a mixture of pure hatred and grudging respect. She had run out of moves. The government contract was worth billions. My fee was a drop in the ocean compared to total corporate annihilation. "Draw it up," Victoria spat at her lead counsel, exactly as she stated, as the lawyers scrambled to frantically type up the new agreement. Victoria picked up her desk phone and dialed the head of building security. Her voice was pure venom. "I want Marcus Vance escorted out of the building right this second," she commanded into the receiver. "He is currently hiding in his office on the 10th floor. Strip his remaining credentials, pack his personal items in a box, and march him out through the front lobby. If he argues, call the police." She slammed the phone down. A few minutes later, the fresh, newly printed contract was placed in front of me. Victoria signed her name with aggressive, sharp strokes, binding EtherCore to my terms. I picked up the pen and elegantly signed my own name. The power dynamic had officially shifted. I had secured my fortune, legally claimed my creation, and arranged for the public humiliation of the man who tried to ruin me. But as I gathered the paperwork, a cold thrill ran down my spine. Victoria and the lawyers thought the bleeding had finally stopped. They had absolutely no idea that the real knot was still waiting to be pulled. With the ink barely dry on the new contract, I opened my personal laptop and placed it on the mahogany table. I pulled a small, encrypted titanium flash drive from my pocket and slid it into the port. My fingers danced across the keyboard, executing a precise series of terminal commands. Within 30 seconds, the massive monitors lining the war room walls flared to life. The menacing red error codes vanished, replaced by a soothing, continuous stream of green lights. The deployment pipeline was fully operational. Every single gigabyte of data was decrypted and restored perfectly to its original state. I glanced across the table. Victoria Sterling leaned back in her chair, a faint, predatory smirk returning to her lips. I knew exactly what she was thinking. She believed she had survived the crisis. She probably thought that once the federal auditors left on Friday, she would unleash her army of corporate lawyers and public relations mercenaries to quietly and systematically destroy my new consulting firm. In her mind, I had won the battle, but she still controlled the long war. She was entirely wrong before Victoria could even issue her next order. The heavy glass doors of the war room were violently shoved open. The corporate security guards did not even try to stop the men entering. Two stern-looking agents in dark suits strode into the room, followed closely by a team of federal investigators. They moved with the undeniable, terrifying authority of the United States government. The lead agent reached into his jacket, pulling out a gold badge and slamming it flat on the mahogany table right next to my newly signed contract. "Securities and Exchange Commission," the lead agent announced, his voice booming through the silent room. "We are executing a federal warrant. Nobody touch a keyboard. We require the immediate lockdown and physical seizure of all top-level executive servers, effective immediately." Victoria's smirk vanished so fast, it was as if she had been physically struck. The blood drained from her face as she looked frantically from the federal agents to her paralyzed legal team, and finally, to me. "What did you do?" Victoria hissed, her voice trembling with a sudden, overwhelming terror. "Did you plant a virus in my network?" I calmly closed my laptop and slipped the titanium drive back into my pocket. "I am a security architect, Victoria. I do not write malware," I replied, my voice steady and crystalline. "The Cerberus protocol is entirely legal. In fact, it is fully compliant with federal regulations. You see, hidden within its core defense matrix is an automated whistleblower subroutine." I stood up, buttoning the front of my emerald blazer with deliberate, unhurried movements. "When your brilliant vice president used his supreme administrator privileges to try and forcefully override the lockdown on Friday afternoon, he did more than just trigger a system freeze. Cerberus recognized his attempt to cover his tracks. It automatically compiled a comprehensive, encrypted package containing every single piece of evidence regarding EtherCore's financial fraud, your deliberate security violations, and Marcus's internal communications." I paused, savoring the look of absolute devastation on her face. "And it sent that entire package directly to the encrypted tip line of the Securities and Exchange Commission." Victoria collapsed back into her expensive leather chair. She was completely broken, her empire crumbling to dust around her in real time. I picked up my briefcase and looked down at her one last time. "Your deployment systems are officially unlocked," I said, my voice echoing with absolute finality. "But your corporate empire is not going to survive this audit. Good luck with the federal investigation, Victoria." I turned my back on the war room and walked out. I did not look back as the federal agents began reading the executives their rights. I took the private elevator down to the main lobby, passing the polished glass turnstiles that had rejected me just days ago. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the bright morning sun. A sleek black luxury town car I had ordered 20 minutes prior was waiting by the curb. I slid into the soft leather back seat and told the driver to head toward the bay. I had not just taken my revenge, I had weaponized their own deceit, turning it into the very rope that hanged them. And the American tech industry would never, ever forget the name Eliana Russell. Thank you so very much for listening to today's story. Dear friends, where in the world are you tuning in from today? Please let us know in the comments below. If you found today's tale of corporate justice satisfying, please remember that our YouTube channel has been heavily affected by demonetization, and we will be forced to stop uploading new videos here very soon. We are moving our entire operation over to Patreon. Please help us by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon community, where you can listen to our absolute best, most exclusive true stories that we simply cannot publish on YouTube. You can join right now by scanning the Patreon QR code on your screen, or by using the Patreon link provided in the video description or the pinned comment. Thank you again for your incredible support, and we cannot wait to see you over there.